The wind was sharp in the settlement's outer streets, carrying fine red dust that stuck to clothes and hair. Rian pulled his jacket tighter as he stepped out of the supply depot, his boots crunching on the cracked ground. It was late, and most of the market stalls were already shuttered, their canvas flaps whipping in the wind. He was halfway to the landing pad when he saw her. She moved quickly along the far side of the street, head down, her long cloak dragging in the dust. Even from a distance, Rian could see how thin she was, her steps unsteady, her frame swallowed by the worn fabric. She glanced around, then slipped into a narrow alley between two storage sheds. Rian frowned. The alley led nowhere except the back of the merchant block. There was no reason to go there this late, unless you didn't want to be seen. Without thinking too much about it, he changed direction. His boots made little sound over the dust as he approached the alley's mouth. The smell hit him first, rot from old refuse, mixed with the faint sour tang of spoiled grain. Then he saw her. She was kneeling beside a trash chute, sifting through a small pile of discarded scraps. Her long fingers picked at the bits of wilted greens and dry bread, placing the edible pieces into a small cloth bundle. Every movement was quick, practiced, and careful, as though she feared being caught. Rian's gut twisted. "Hey!" he said gently. She froze, her back stiffening. Slowly, she turned her head toward him. Her face was pale beneath the dust, her features sharp and elegant despite the weariness in her eyes. Two small ridges ran from her brow to her temples, marks of her alien heritage. When their eyes met, she clutched the bundle to her chest and stood quickly. "I'm not here to hurt you," Rian said, raising his hands slightly. She stepped back, her gaze darting to the alley's exit. Rian took a slow step forward. "You don't have to do this. If you're hungry, I can." She bolted, her cloak flaring as she darted past him into the street. By the time he turned, she was already halfway down the road, disappearing into the shadows between buildings. Rian let out a breath, rubbing a hand over his jaw. He could have chased her, but that wasn't the way. Not if he wanted her to trust him. He headed back to the landing pad, her image still in his mind. The hollow cheeks, the guarded eyes, the way she had clutched those scraps like they were gold. The next day, he made a point of asking around quietly. Most people shrugged or looked away when he described her. A few muttered things like, "widow" or "bad luck," before changing the subject. By evening, he had a plan. He bought extra bread, dried fruit, and a small pack of nutrient paste from the depot. He wrapped it all in cloth and waited near the alley where he'd first seen her. Took a while, but just after nightfall, she appeared again. The same careful glance over her shoulder, the same quick steps into the shadows. Rian waited until she was kneeling by the trash chute before stepping forward. "You dropped this." She turned, startled, as he held out the bundle. Her eyes flicked from his face to the food, then back. "I don't take charity," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "It's not charity," Rian replied. "It's a trade. You take this, and maybe someday you can help me with something. Deal?" She hesitated. The wind tugged at her cloak, revealing how thin her arms were beneath. Finally, she reached out, her fingers brushing the cloth as she took it. She didn't thank him, but she didn't run this time either. "Name's Rian," he said. "If you ever need more, I'm at the landing pad, Bay 3. She looked at him for a moment longer, then turned and disappeared into the night. Rian stood there for a while after she was gone, the sound of the wind filling the empty alley. He didn't know her story yet, but he knew one thing. He wasn't about to let her starve in secret. Every evening, he passed the alley where they had first met, carrying something extra in case she appeared. But the shadows stayed empty, and the only sound was the whistle of wind through the metal storage sheds. On the third night, he found her again. She was perched on the edge of a low wall, head bent, her thin cloak wrapped tight against the cold. Her eyes were fixed on the ground, as if she were somewhere far away. Rian stepped into view slowly, holding a small bundle of food. "You didn't come by the other night," he said, keeping his tone light. Figured maybe you were avoiding me. Her gaze lifted just long enough to meet his eyes before dropping again. You shouldn't be here. Why not? It's not safe. For you. He moved closer, leaning one shoulder against the wall. I've been in unsafe places before. She shook her head. Not like this. Rian unwrapped the bundle and placed it on the wall between them. Bread, a piece of dried meat, a small packet of water. It's just food, he said. No strings. You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to. Her hands stayed in her lap. People will see. They'll talk. Let them. Her jaw tightened. You don't understand. I'm a widow. That means I carry my husband's shadow. Among my people, that shadow brings misfortune. No one speaks to me, no one trades with me. If they see you giving me food, they'll say the misfortune will follow you too. Rian studied her face. Her eyes had a dullness that came from years of being pushed aside. You really believe that? Her shoulders lifted in a small shrug. It doesn't matter what I believe. They believe it. And that's enough. He thought about the way the merchants had glanced away when he asked about her, the muttered warnings, the quick changes of subject. Your husband, he asked carefully. How did he? Her head came up sharply. Mining accident. He saved others. The roof fell on him. After that, I had no ration card, no home. Only what I could find. Rian frowned. So they punish you for surviving? They say I am a reminder of the collapse, she said quietly, and that my presence tempts the mines to take more lives. I am unwelcome. He glanced at the untouched food on the wall. You'd rather go hungry than risk someone seeing you take this? Her eyes flicked toward the bundle, then away again. If I take it and they see, they will think you have chosen my shadow. They will turn from you too. Rian let out a slow breath. I'm not from here. I don't care what they think. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the rustle of wind in the cloth awning above. Finally, she reached out, her hand hovering over the food before drawing back. I can't, she whispered. He didn't press her. Instead, he wrapped the bundle again and set it gently beside her on the wall. If you change your mind, it's yours. I'll be in Bay 3 for the next few days. She didn't answer, and he walked away without looking back. The next morning, Rian returned to the alley. The bundle was gone. That evening, as he worked on his ship's maintenance panel, a quiet voice spoke from the open hatch behind him. You left food. He turned to see her standing there, cloak drawn tight, the wind tossing strands of her dark hair across her face. You ate it? He asked. A small nod. He straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. Good. Then maybe tomorrow I'll... No, she said quickly. Not tomorrow. Not again so soon. Rian frowned. Why not? Too much will draw eyes. One act of kindness they may ignore. More than that, and they will think you are choosing me. Her voice faltered on the last words, but she held his gaze. Then let them think it, Rian said. She shook her head. You don't understand how dangerous it is to be marked by my shadow. Rian stepped closer, his tone firm but not unkind. Kayla, I don't care about shadows. I care about you not starving. If that makes me marked, so be it. Her eyes widened slightly at the sound of her name. How? I asked around, he said. Didn't get much, but I got that. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe even a hint of warmth. Then it was gone, replaced by the guarded look she wore like armor. I should go, she said softly. Then go, Rian replied. But you know where to find me. She hesitated a heartbeat longer before disappearing into the night. As the hatch closed behind her, Rian leaned against the wall, wondering how many nights it would take before her caution lost to hunger again. He intended to be there when it did. The settlement's main street was busier than usual. Rian could feel eyes following him as he walked from the parts shop toward the supply depot. It wasn't subtle. People glanced, looked away quickly, then leaned toward their neighbors to murmur something. He'd been in enough rough ports to know when his name was in the air. As he stepped inside the depot, the clerk, a wiry older man with deep creases in his face, gave him a long look. "You've been talking to the widow," the man said without preamble. Rian set a crate of fuel cells on the counter. "Her name's Kayla." The clerk's expression didn't change. "Names don't change shadows. You do well to keep your distance." Rian raised an eyebrow. "That a threat?" "A warning," the clerk replied. "This settlement runs on balance. We don't invite bad luck." Rian paid without another word, though his jaw was tight as he carried the crate outside. He didn't put much stock in superstition, but it was clear Kayla's isolation wasn't just habit. It was enforced by everyone around her. That evening, he found her sitting on a low step outside an abandoned storage unit, knees drawn to her chest. She didn't startle when he approached this time. "You've been avoiding the alley," Rian said. "I didn't want you to keep bringing food." "Why?" "Because the locals are watching." Her gaze stayed on the dusty ground. "They don't like seeing me with anyone. They will punish you for it." "They've already started talking," Rian admitted. "And I'm still here." At that, her eyes lifted slightly. "Why?" Rian leaned against the wall beside her. "Because I've seen too many people walk away when someone needs help. I'm not built for that." Kayla studied him for a moment. "You're not afraid of what they'll do to you?" "Should I be?" She gave a small shrug. "They can make life difficult. Refuse to sell to you. Spread lies. Out here, that can be dangerous." Rian smiled faintly. "I've been to worse places than this." For the first time, her lips curved, just barely, into something that might have been the beginning of a smile. "I believe that." Over the next few days, he saw her more often. Sometimes she would linger near the docking bay while he worked on his ship. Other times she would appear in the market, keeping her distance but letting him know she was there. Each time she spoke a little more. She told him small things, a favorite food from her childhood, the sound of her homeworld storms, how her husband used to hum while working in the mines. Rian listened without pushing. He didn't ask for details she wasn't ready to share. One afternoon, as they stood by the edge of the landing pad watching the sun sink toward the horizon, Kayla said quietly, "I wasn't always alone. After he died, I thought, maybe the others would help me. But the council declared his death a bad omen. And then, the looks began. The silences. The doors closing. That's not help," Rian said. "That's exile." She gave a small nod. "It is easier for them to forget I exist. Easier to pretend there is no shadow." He glanced at her. "Do you believe it? That you bring bad luck?" Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "I believe I am hungry, and cold, and tired. The rest." She let the words trail off. The settlement's whispers didn't stop. One evening, as Rian was leaving the cantina, two men stepped into his path. "You're the pilot from Bay 3, one said. "You've been keeping company with the widow." Rian didn't slow. "You say that like it's your business." "It is everyone's business when her shadow spreads," the man replied. "You'd be smart to cut ties before it gets you into trouble." Rian's voice was calm, but his eyes were cold. "I don't take orders from strangers in alleys." They moved aside, but the warning in their stares lingered as he walked away. Later that night, he found Kayla in the alley, sitting cross-legged with her back against the wall. He set down a small package beside her. "Bread and stew," he said. "Still warm." She looked at it, then up at him. "They spoke to you, didn't they?" "They tried," Rian said. "I told them I don't scare easy." Her expression softened for a moment. "You shouldn't have to do this." "Maybe not," he said, "but I'm choosing to." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the wind carrying the distant hum of the settlement's generators. Then, almost shyly, Kayla reached for the food. And this time, she didn't look away when their eyes met. One morning, the market stalls opened late. By noon, most were half empty. Rian noticed merchants charging double for basics and refusing to haggle. The usual smells of fresh bread and cooked grain were missing, replaced by the dry scent of stored goods. By the second day, even the depot's shelves looked thin. The governor's office claimed it was a temporary shipping delay. Rian had been around long enough to know that was a lie. He saw Kayla in the market that afternoon. She was standing near a grain vendor's stall, her head lowered as the merchant waved her away with a curt motion. Her ration card hung limply in her hand. Rian crossed the street. "What happened?" "They refused me," she said softly. "Said they can't spare food for someone who doesn't work for the settlement." He glanced at the merchant, who turned his back deliberately. "You've been buying from him for years, haven't you?" Kayla's eyes were tired. "I don't buy much, but enough to keep me alive." Her voice was calm, but he could see the tightness in her jaw. She had learned to take the rejection quietly, the way you take bad weather, you endure it. That evening, Rian brought her a small loaf of bread and a water flask. She took them without speaking, but her hands lingered over the bread for a moment longer than usual, as though weighing whether to ration it or eat it all at once. By the third day, the settlement's mood had changed. People were quicker to anger in the streets. 2 fights broke out in the market over the last crate of dried roots. Rian saw armed guards posted by the depot, something he hadn't seen before. He went looking for Kayla but didn't find her in her usual spots. The alley was empty. The abandoned storage unit where she sometimes sat was locked. He checked the outskirts of the settlement and found her there, sitting on the ground with her back against a wall, her knees drawn up. "Kayla," he said, kneeling beside her. "When did you last eat?" She didn't answer. He reached for her arm gently. Her skin felt cool, and her movements were slow. She tried to wave him off, but her strength gave out, and she leaned forward, her forehead touching his shoulder. Rian didn't think. He just lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than she should have been. He carried her through the settlement, ignoring the stares. Some people whispered. Others looked away. No one stepped forward to help. At the docking bay, he keyed open the hatch to his ship and brought her inside. The air was warmer, smelling faintly of metal and coffee. He set her down on a padded bench in the cargo bay and pulled a blanket over her. Her eyes fluttered open. "I can't stay here," she murmured. "You can and you will," Rian said firmly. "You need rest and food. I've got both." "You'll make enemies," she whispered. "I've already made them," he replied, moving to the small galley. He heated a nutrient pack and poured water into a cup. When he returned, she was watching him with a faint frown. "Why?" He placed the cup in her hands. "Because you're not a problem to be ignored. And I'm not leaving you out there to collapse in the street again." For a moment, she didn't move. Then she sipped the water, slow and careful, as if relearning the act. Over the next few hours, she ate in small amounts, curled under the blanket. She didn't speak much, but her eyes followed him whenever he moved around the ship. When the second night fell, she finally said, "You shouldn't have done this." Rian, sitting across from her, shook his head. "If helping you is something I shouldn't do, then I don't care about should or shouldn't." Her lips curved slightly, almost but not quite a smile. "You don't understand. I have nothing to give back." "You've survived more than most people could," he said. "That's worth something." She didn't reply, but she didn't look away either. Outside, the settlement's lights flickered against the dark horizon. Inside, the ship was quiet, except for the low hum of the generators and the slow sound of Kayla's breathing as she drifted into sleep, warm, fed, and safe for the first time in a long while. Rian sat for a while longer, watching over her, and knew one thing for certain. He wasn't taking her back to the streets. Not now. Not ever. By the next morning, Kayla had enough strength to sit upright at the small table in the ship's galley. The blanket was still wrapped around her shoulders, but there was more color in her face, and her eyes no longer carried that dull, faraway look. Rian set a steaming cup of broth in front of her and slid into the seat across from her. "You feeling any better?" She gave a small nod. "Better than I was." "Good," he said, "because it's time you told me the real story." Her gaze sharpened slightly. "You think I've lied to you?" "No," Rian replied. "I think you've been telling me just enough to make me stop asking questions. But I've seen the way people look at you. I know the shortage gave them an excuse to let you starve, but this started long before that." "Why?" Kayla's fingers tightened on the cup. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then she said quietly, "Because my husband was not just another miner. He was the lead safety officer in the northern shafts. When the collapse happened, he went in to pull out the trapped workers. He got them out, but he never came back." Rian leaned forward. "That makes him a hero, not a curse." Her voice was bitter. "Not to the council here. The collapse had been warned about by him. He had told them the supports were failing. They ignored him. After his death, they feared the families of those saved would demand answers. So they twisted the story. Said the collapse was an act of the mines themselves, a bad omen, and that his wife Me was the carrier of that omen." Rian felt heat rise in his chest. "They blamed you to cover their own mistakes. They took my ration card the day after his memorial," Kayla said. "No food, no work. Only whispers and closed doors. If anyone helped me, they were marked too. So most chose not to." Her tone was flat, but Rian could hear the years of exhaustion behind it. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. Her lips curved faintly, but there was no humor in it. "Where would I go? I have no ship, no money, and every world has its own way of deciding who belongs and who doesn't." Rian leaned back, his mind already moving past her words. "What if I told you I could get you out of here?" She frowned. "And go where?" "Anywhere not run by these cowards," he said. "I've got contacts off-world, people who owe me favors. You could start over." Kayla's eyes narrowed. "And why would you do that for me?" He met her gaze evenly. "Because you deserve a life that isn't measured in scraps from a trash chute." Silence filled the small galley. Outside, the faint creak of the ship's hull echoed as the wind shifted against it. Finally, she said, "If you try, they'll stop you. The governor controls all docking and departure. He'll say you're breaking settlement law by taking an outcast." Rian gave a thin smile. "Then I guess we'll just have to be smarter than him." For the next 2 days, Rian kept Kayla aboard his ship, making sure she had steady meals and time to recover her strength. She stayed quiet, often sitting in the corner of the cargo bay watching him work. He used the time to quietly prepare. He checked the ship's fuel reserves, calibrated the engines for a fast departure, and reviewed the docking bay's security shifts. He also made a few coded calls to old smuggling contacts, asking about safe routes off-world. On the third night, Kayla approached him while he was tightening a panel in the engine room. "You're really going to try this?" she said. Not as a question, but as a statement. "I am," he said. "And I need you ready when I say go." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," he replied, wiping his hands on a rag. "But when we get to wherever we're going next, you'll have to promise me something." Her brow furrowed. "What?" "That you won't let them break you again." Kayla held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "I promise." That night, Rian sat in the cockpit, staring at the blinking lights of the control panels. The plan was risky. If the governor's enforcers caught them, the best outcome would be losing the ship. The worst he didn't bother dwelling on. But the image of Kayla in that alley, her hands clutching scraps of food, had burned itself into his memory. He'd made up his mind. The morning of their planned departure, the air in the docking bay felt heavier than usual. Rian had the ship prepped and running under the guise of engine testing. Kayla was already inside, sitting in the co-pilot's chair with her cloak pulled tight. Rian was double-checking the cargo seals when the sound of boots on metal rang out across the bay. He turned to see a group of enforcers in dark uniforms approaching, their armor polished and the governor's crest gleaming on their shoulders. The lead officer stopped a few meters away, his voice sharp. "Rian Cole, you are ordered to step away from your vessel." Rian didn't move. "Something I can help you with?" "You're under investigation for aiding an outcast," the officer said. "Our records show you've been harboring the widow Kayla without clearance." "That's not a crime," Rian said flatly. "It is under settlement law," the officer replied. "Outcasts are forbidden to board any vessel without the governor's express permission. Hand her over, and you can go about your business." Rian crossed his arms. "Not happening." The officer's jaw tightened. If you resist, we are authorized to seize your ship and detain you. A murmur rippled through the bay. Dock workers, merchants, and passers-by had stopped to watch. From inside the cockpit, Kayla's voice came through the open hatch. Then you'll have to take me in front of all of them. Rian glanced back in surprise as Kayla stepped out, her cloak falling open enough to show her face clearly. She walked down the ramp slowly, her eyes steady on the officer. "You want to arrest me?" she said, her voice carrying across the space. "Do it here, where everyone can see exactly what you are." The officer's eyes narrowed. "Your shadow is dangerous. You should not be among the people." "My shadow?" she said, her tone sharper now. "You mean the lies you told after my husband died saving your miners. The lies that kept me hungry so you wouldn't have to admit your negligence." A few of the onlookers muttered to each other. The officer's face tightened. "Enough." "No," Kayla cut in, her voice rising. "I have lived in silence for years, too afraid to speak. But not anymore. If you take me now, you prove to everyone that the council's stories are just a way to bury the truth. And if you take him," she pointed toward Rian, "then you make an enemy of someone who chose kindness over your fear." The officer shifted uncomfortably as the crowd's murmurs grew louder. Some of the dock workers were watching with folded arms, their faces set. "Governor's orders," the officer said, but there was less force in his voice now. Rian stepped forward. "You heard her. If you want her, you'll have to do it with an audience. Maybe even an audience willing to talk off-world." The officer's eyes flicked toward the gathering crowd. He clearly didn't want this confrontation becoming a public spectacle. After a long moment, he gestured to his squad. "Stand down." The enforcers backed away, their footsteps heavy on the metal floor. The officer gave Rian a cold look. "You've made a mistake. Both of you." Then they turned and left the bay. For a moment, the space was silent. Then a few of the bystanders began to drift away, whispering to each other. Kayla let out a slow breath. "I didn't think they would back down." "They didn't," Rian said. "They just decided today wasn't the day." She looked at him. "Then we should go before they change their minds." He nodded and guided her back up the ramp. Moments later, the hatch sealed, and the ship's engines roared to full power. As they lifted off, Kayla sat in the co-pilot's seat, her hands gripping the armrests. The settlement shrank beneath them, its clusters of buildings fading into the dust and wind. "Once we're off-world, there's no coming back," Rian said. "I know," she replied, "and I don't want to." The ship broke through the atmosphere, stars spilling into the viewport. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of the settlement's shadow begin to lift. But both of them knew the governor's reach didn't end at the planet's edge. The stars stretched out like a frozen sea beyond the viewport, the ship gliding through the quiet dark. The hum of the engines was steady, a sound that had already begun to feel like safety to Kayla. She sat in the co-pilot's chair, watching the settlement's planet shrink into a pale on the NAV display. The knot that had lived in her chest for years was loosening, but she didn't quite know what to do with the space it left behind. Rian leaned back in the pilot's seat, one hand resting on the controls. "We've got enough fuel to reach the outer trade routes. After that, I know a place where the governor's writ means nothing." Kayla glanced at him. "Is it safe?" He gave a small smile. "Safe enough for someone who's tired of looking over her shoulder. And more importantly, it's a place where you're not anyone's shadow." The words sank into her slowly. She looked back out at the stars, thinking of the settlement's narrow streets, the turned backs, the cold nights. It already felt like another lifetime. A few hours later, Rian set the ship on autopilot and disappeared into the small galley. When he returned, he carried a tray with 2 steaming bowls and a loaf of fresh bread from his stores. The smell filled the cockpit, warm, rich, alive. Kayla blinked at the sight. "You kept fresh bread on a cargo ship?" "Picked it up on my last run," Rian said, setting the tray on the console between them. "Was saving it for a special occasion." "And this is one? Escaping a planet full of superstitious cowards?" "Yeah, I'd call that special." She hesitated before taking the bowl. The warmth seeped into her hands, and for a moment, she just sat there holding it, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Welcome. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the hum of the engines filling the spaces between their words. After the meal, Kayla leaned back, looking out at the endless black. I don't know what I'll do now, she admitted. I've only ever known one home, one life, and it was small. Rian glanced at her. Then make a bigger one. I can drop you somewhere you like or, he paused. You can stay on for a while. See more than just one sky. She studied him, searching for a catch, but found none. You'd let me? It's my ship, he said with a shrug. I decide who's aboard. And I think you've had enough of people deciding you don't belong. The corner of her mouth lifted, a faint but genuine smile. I think I'd like to see more skies. Hours passed, the ship cutting through the dark. Kayla began exploring, her bare feet silent on the metal floor. She trailed her fingers along the bulkheads, peeked into the small cargo hold, and stood for a while in the observation port, watching distant suns flicker. Rian found her there. Looks better than a dusty market street, doesn't it? She nodded. It feels open, like the air is bigger here. That's because it is, he said with a grin. Out here, you decide where to go next. No one else. Kayla's gaze stayed on the stars. It doesn't feel real yet. I keep thinking I'll wake up back in the alley. You won't, Rian said. But if you ever feel like you're drifting, just remember, whatever they called you before doesn't matter anymore. By the time they reached the edge of the outer trade routes, Kayla's shoulders no longer carried the same invisible weight. She moved with more steadiness, her eyes meeting his without the guardedness she'd once worn like armor. They made a stop at a small orbital station to take on fuel. No one asked questions, and no one looked at Kayla like she was something to avoid. She walked beside Rian through the station's narrow corridors without feeling the urge to disappear into the shadows. When they returned to the ship, Rian opened the hatch and gestured for her to go first. After you, co-pilot. She stepped inside, a small laugh escaping her before she could stop it. Felt strange in her own ears, strange, but good. That night, back in the cockpit, Rian brought out another loaf of bread and placed it between them. No ration cards, no begging, no cold alleys, he said. From now on, if you're hungry, you tell me, and we eat together. Kayla looked at the bread, then at him. Not charity? Not charity, he said firmly. A meal, between crew. For the first time in years, she reached for food without glancing over her shoulder. And when she took the first bite, it wasn't just her hunger that eased. It was the years of silence, shame, and shadows lifting, piece by piece. As the ship sailed on into the deep, the two of them sat in the glow of the cockpit's soft lights, sharing a simple meal. Neither spoke about the past. Neither needed to. The future, for the first time, felt wide open.